Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Today on the channel we're going to talk about one of the #1 health hazards and potentially fatal events that could befall lots of women after it hits the fan and could be a major burden on you and your community. So let's get to it. So, it's happened. The shizzy has finally hit the proverbial fizzy. And you're in lockdown or maybe in your bunker, you got nothing but time on your hands, right? And who wants to use their hands? Let's get real. So you look over at your significant other, she's giving you the eye, you're giving her the eye, and you know what time it is. But time out. Hold on a minute. Have you really thought this through? Unfortunately, we now live in a world of dwindling contraceptive supplies. And let's face it, as great as the miracle of life is, a crying baby in an apocalyptic situation is like ringing a permanent dinner bell for the zombie hordes that await. Let's go check in with Dr. Joe Alton, MD, author of the Survival Medicine Handbook, to see if he has any advice for us.
It's a rare individual that doesn't have a female relative or partner of childbearing age. Even if they aren't related personally, they're likely going to comprise probably half of your survival group. Have a daughter that's 10 years old? When the you-know-what hits the fan? Well, if you're lucky, she'll reach reproductive age one day. That means you, medic, will need to know how to deal with women's issues, including, yes, pregnancy and childbirth. If something really bad happens, society is going to be unstable, and organized medical care is going to be spotty at best and non-existent at worst. If we lose access to modern healthcare, pregnancy might no longer be considered a blessed event. In a long-term survival scenario, you may feel a responsibility to repopulate the world. While this is vital to the survival of the species, your family must first survive. Until things settle down, a pregnancy and the possible complications that might accompany it will be a burden. Why? History tells us that the death rate among pregnant women, also known as the maternal mortality rate, at the time of the American Revolution was about 1 to 2% per pregnancy. The average U.S. woman in the year 1800 could expect to deliver maybe 8 babies over the course of her reproductive life. So the lifetime risk of maternal death could approach 10 to 15%, and that's not including complications from additional pregnancies ending in miscarriages. Many healthy young women died due to complications of either being pregnant, during the childbirth, or even soon after a successful delivery. The medic needs a working knowledge of pregnancy, delivery, and its complications. In a long-term disaster setting that knocks us off the grid, the unprepared citizen won't have neither medicine nor medical supplies with which to treat problems that occur during pregnancy and childbirth. Medications to stop bleeding or treat infection that occur after childbirth will be scarce. Deaths may occur simply because there aren't IV fluids to prevent dehydration from spiraling out of control. These tragedies could occur at a time when we'll need every member of our survival group to be productive individuals. Growing food, managing livestock, perimeter defense, caring for children, that's going to take the full attention and energy of everyone involved. When a pregnancy goes wrong, it takes away a valuable contributor from the survival family, sometimes permanently, and places additional strains on resources and remaining manpower. We don't want anybody to think that off the grid all women will die during or right after their pregnancy. Even when things go well, however, the question is, if people are rioting in the streets and your garden isn't producing food yet, should a newborn baby be added to your list of responsibilities? If the answer is yes, the group had better be prepared with the knowledge and resources to deal with the consequences. We'll talk about that later.
But wait, can't I just stockpile lots of condoms?
You're very astute in understanding that condoms are indeed a medical supply that could be very useful in a survival scenario. Until things have stabilized a bit, you need to think about some kind of family planning. The first commercial condoms were manufactured in 1855 by a guy you might have heard of, Charles Goodyear. In 1839, he discovered rubber vulcanization, the technology which led to the creation of the first rubber condoms. That's why they're called rubbers, although there's no rubber in condoms today. Given that they were the thickness of a bicycle inner tube and had to be custom fitted, they were more than a little cumbersome. Today's are easier to work with. Fresh ones are about 98% effective if you use them perfectly every time you have sex. No one's perfect, so let's say about 90% is a good figure. Some recommend menstrual cups for use by women. Even though menstrual cups and discs look somewhat like a diaphragm, an actual birth control method, they won't protect you against pregnancy or sexually transmitted diseases like a diaphragm would. A diaphragm, by the way, is a dome-shaped bowl made of flexible silicone. When used correctly with spermicide, does a decent job of protecting against pregnancy. When the spermicide runs out, well, Maria, you're right to be concerned about condom shelf life as condoms become brittle as they age. The average shelf life of a condom is 3 to 5 years, depending on the manufacturer and how it's stored. Wear and tear from years spent in a purse or wallet, or your car's glove compartment, can seriously erode a condom's strength. That's why it's important to keep condoms stored away from heat, humidity, and any sharp objects. Your bathroom medicine cabinet, by the way, is not where you should store them. Too humid. Even if a condom is stored perfectly, its rate of expiration is still influenced by the material it's made from and whether it's been manufactured with any additives that shorten its lifespan. Currently, condoms are made from latex, polyurethane, polyisoprene, and lamb or sheepskin. Latex and polyurethane condoms have the longest shelf lives. They can last up to 5 years and are sturdier than other types. Polyisoprene lasts about 3 years. The natural ones, well, they only last about a year before they lose peak efficiency. As a general use, spermicide drops the shelf life of every one of these condoms somewhat. Oh, by the way, you should know that lambskin condoms don't protect very well against sexually transmitted diseases. You shouldn't use condoms that are discolored, stiff, sticky, torn, leaking lubricant, or have an unusual smell. Using an expired or damaged condom without these signs, at least, is still better than not using any condom at all, because it will offer some protection against STDs or unwanted pregnancy, just not 90%. Once the condoms run out, you'll have to use natural family planning strategies. This is a long topic, so we'll discuss that another time.
So your primitive drives got the best of you, and now you're screwed because you screwed. What are you gonna do now? Let's go back to Dr. Bones and see if he has any advice for your dumbass.
Well, we are, of course, fortunate to have simple tests that identify pregnancy almost before your patient misses a period. This time frame varies, but most pregnancy tests typically expire between 2 to 3 years from when they were manufactured. The less expensive tests usually expire sooner, pricier ones tend to be more reliable and have a longer shelf life. It's worth it to add some to medical storage, but what if these tests are no longer available? The medic will have to rely on the following tried and true signs and symptoms to identify the condition. Of course, absent menstruation is one. You want to encourage the women in your group to keep track of their periods so they have an idea if they've missed one. Early pregnancies will also experience tender and large breasts, and you'll see some amount of nausea, even vomiting sometimes, and that's sometimes related to very sensitive smell. As time goes on, you'll notice signs like darkening of the nipples, frequent urination, backache, fatigue, dizziness, things like that. These symptoms in various combinations are indicative of pregnancy. The timing of each will be variable, some will be noticed earlier than others. It should be noted that this will likely be necessary only in those women experiencing their first pregnancy. If a woman's been pregnant once, she'll probably know when it happens again. She'll tell you, hey, I'm pregnant. Of course, as time goes on, the abdominal swelling associated with uterine and fetal growth will be undeniable. Long, narrow streaks of stretch marks will eventually appear on the abdomen of the majority of women. Hemorrhoids and varicose veins, these are also very common, but not universal. These changes are part and parcel of the average healthy pregnancy. Most of the above will improve after the pregnancy is over, but may not disappear completely. So how do you determine the due date? This is the question everyone will want answered once a pregnancy is actually identified. A human pregnancy lasts about 280 days or 40 weeks from the first day of the last menstrual period to the estimated date of delivery. This was once called the estimated date of confinement, or EDC, because yes, they confined women to their beds as they approached it. Due dates are most accurate in women that have very regular menstrual cycles. So how to calculate a due date? To calculate a due date, if you have regular monthly periods, you subtract 3 months and add 7 days to the first day of the last period. For example, if the first day of the last menstrual period, or LMP, is 9/7, September 7, 9/7, then the due date is 6/14. 9 minus 3 equals 6, 7 plus 7 equals 14.
All right, guys, so as cool as it might be to have a radioactive baby with Hulk-like superpowers after the bombs drop, like a Godzilla-type hybrid human, the fact of the matter is it's going to be a lot more grim than that. And the stress of an SHTF situation combined with the malnutrition and even the radiation emitted from spent fuel rods from abandoned nuclear reactors or, heaven forbid, nuclear fallout, that's going to have an impact on a child or an unborn fetus. So my question for Dr. Bones is, what advice does he have to mitigate these problems?
Good question. When it comes to radiation exposure, 50 rads of maternal exposure daily can lead, depending on the stage of the pregnancy, to malformations, poor growth and development, impaired brain function, and even cancer in the fetus. Maternal malnutrition, well, that increases the risk of poor pregnancy outcomes as well, including premature or low birth weight babies, and that is a big issue. Low birth weight is a significant contributor to infant mortality, a major concern off the grid. On the part of the mother, severe bleeding after the delivery is more likely and could be fatal. Just visit a 19th century cemetery and you'll see a lot of infants and young mothers' tombstones. There are many diseases which have their own individual effects on a pregnancy, so it's hard to go into every one. I'll tell you that diabetes, for example, leads to large babies, very large babies, 10 pounds or more in some cases. A very big baby can cause major problems during delivery, causing heavy bleeding from vaginal tears in the mother and getting maybe the fetus's head or shoulders stuck in the birth canal, which can lead to brain or other nerve damage or even stillbirth. Then there's stress. During pregnancy, general stress can increase the chances of having a premature baby, defined as being born before 37 weeks of pregnancy, or a low birth weight baby, defined as being less than 5 pounds 8 ounces. The only good news here is that it's easier to deliver a 5 pound 8 ounce baby than a 10 pound one. Without C-section as an option, this may inadvertently save some mothers' lives. Okay, this one from Mark G. Say you're taking care of a pregnant woman, how can you tell when she's getting close to going into labor? As a woman approaches her due date, several things happen. The fetus begins to drop and assumes a position deep in the pelvis. The patient's abdomen may actually look different, or maybe the top of the uterus, also called the fundus, may appear lower. As the neck of the uterus, also called the cervix, relaxes, the patient may notice a mucus-like discharge mixed with a little blood. This is known as the bloody show and is usually a sign that labor is going to occur soon. The process may start anywhere from the next few hours to even a week or so. If you examine your patient vaginally by gently inserting 2 fingers of a gloved hand, you'll notice the cervix is firm like your nose when it's not ripe, but becomes soft like your lips when the due date is approaching. Softening and thinning out of the cervix is called effacement. When about 50% effaced, the cervix is half its normal thickness and length. At 100% effacement, which is called completely effaced, the cervix is paper thin. Effacement usually occurs before any significant opening of the cervix, also called dilation, occurs. At one point or another, a woman around her due date will start having contractions, which over time start becoming more frequent. What's a contraction feel like to the medic? In between contractions, the top of the uterus feels like your cheek. When you're in the midst of a contraction, it feels like your forehead. Irregular contractions may indicate false labor, also known as Braxton Hicks contractions. These will subside with simple bed rest and hydration. If contractions are coming faster and more furious, even with bed rest and hydration, it's likely going to be the real thing. During pregnancy, a bag filled with fluid surrounds and protects the fetus. This bag is made up of 2 membranes that form what we call the amniotic sac. When a tear occurs in the sac, a gush of fluid from the vagina will occur, signifying breaking the water. This may occur before or during labor, but it's a sign that delivery may be forthcoming. The timing will be highly variable, however, and sometimes urine leakage may confuse the situation. A product called nitrazine paper, a very useful component of our OB delivery kit, will go from yellow to a bright blue when it touches amniotic fluid. A bright blue result is called nitrazine positive, usually verifies that the bag of water is broken. If it stays yellow, the water likely hasn't broken. If you're lucky enough to have a microscope in the hospital tent, a little amniotic fluid dried on a slide actually reveals fern-like crystals. This is known as ferning and is even more solid proof that the water is broken. You should have supplies ready to go when a member of your group is close to their due date. We at Doom and Bloom, Alton First Aid, have put together a professional delivery kit with instructions, something we think is a good idea to have if the medic's duties might include birthing a baby. That's coming from a nurse midwife and an obstetrician. Be sure to check out the list of contents at our store website at store.doomandbloom.net. We're not telling you to buy our stuff, but make certain to at least have the items in our list of contents. Believe me, you'll be glad you did.
Post-apocalyptic child support, nobody wants to pay it. But we have to do our part in promulgating the species. You f***ed up, just don't f*** up again. Maybe Dr. Bones has some advice for what we can do now that we f***ed up.
The first 6 weeks after delivery is called the postpartum period. During the first few days, the mother must be watched very closely for signs of bleeding, infection, and all sorts of other issues. In the immediate postpartum period, the uterus after delivery naturally contracts to control bleeding. The top of the uterus, also called the fundus, is now felt around the level of the belly button. In a long labor, the uterus may be as tired as the mother after delivery and may be slow to contract. Medications like oxytocin and metrogen are given in modern times to firm up the uterus, but gently massaging the top of the uterus should also work to limit blood loss. The medic does this regularly during the first 24 hours or so after delivery. Minutes, depending on the amount of bleeding, closer together for heavy bleeding. Monitor the mother closely for excessive bleeding and fever over the next few days. Encourage emptying the bladder often, as a full bladder may actually interfere with uterine contractions and hemorrhage control. Ice packs to the perineum for the first 24 hours, that may decrease swelling and discomfort. Hemorrhoid creams may be helpful if these are an issue. A squeeze bottle filled with warm water is used to flush the healing vaginal area after every trip to the toilet. It helps to keep the perineal area clean and helps to prevent infection. You may have heard the perineum called the taint, because it taint what's below and it taint what's above. That's a little obstetric humor there. Additionally, having the mother sit in shallow warm water baths is soothing and speeds healing. This is what we call a sitz bath. You should take vital signs regularly, especially looking out for fever or blood pressure abnormalities. Perineal pads should be placed and evaluated for the amount of blood and, of course, any foul odors. In any normal situation, the bleeding becomes lighter and more watery as time progresses. It would be wise to place the baby on the mother's breast soon after delivery. This will begin the secretion of colostrum, a clear yellow liquid rich in substances that will increase the baby's resistance to infection. Suckling also causes the uterus to contract, which decreases blood loss. It's also important to recognize the importance of bonding between mother and baby when breastfeeding. Activity may be slowly increased as the postpartum period progresses, but vigorous exercise, work, and especially sex should not be resumed for the full 6 weeks, if at all possible, to allow full healing. It should be noted that depression may be seen in a new mother. Poor appetite, staying bedridden, and lack of interest in the baby are some possible signs. In normal times, some new mothers are given antidepressant drugs, but support, time, community support, and inclusion in group activities, I think, are better strategies, especially off the grid. Having a support group offer help by babysitting and performing some baby care duties, that will help the new mother and give her time to relax and give her breaks. Believe me, she'll be very grateful. Nursing women need about 500 extra calories each day, as well as plenty of protein, calcium, and fluids to stay healthy and produce lots of breast milk. You should provide a balanced diet that includes lean meats, high fiber foods, low-fat dairy products, and plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables. Of course, off the grid, you take what you can get. It should be noted that there are different schools of thought regarding some of this stuff, many of which are equally valid. Remember that your goal is to have, as an end result, a healthy mother and baby, both physically and emotionally.
So guys, if the bombs are dropping and at the first sign of relief, you decide that it's a good time to bust a nut, do us all a favor and don't procreate just yet. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.